morning, imagine a multi-billion-dollar stealth armada, equipped with the most advanced targeting systems in human history,
Right.
and it is brought to a grinding halt by a $500 rusted metal sphere just floating in the ocean.
It's quite a picture.
It really is. Today's intelligence brief explores how the rulebook of global superpower warfare was just fundamentally rewritten. We are coming to you live with a calm, comprehensive analysis designed to cut through the static and just deliver the facts.
Exactly. Just the facts.
The title of today's deep dive is Hormuz Flashpoint, U.S. Blockade Signals New Phase in Iran Conflict. Our regional focus is the Middle East, specifically Iran, and today's broadcast date is the 16th of April, 2026.
And, the events of the past 2 weeks have presented us with a drastically altered security architecture in that region. Cascading impacts they're already being felt globally.
Yeah, before we delve into those impacts, a smooth reminder that this brief is brought to you by ProWave AI and is generated by Stylo News.
A great tool.
Truly. Stylo News is the consumer version of Stylo Intel Ops, and for those who don't know, that is the enterprise software designed specifically for government, military, and high-level business operations.
Right.
What that means for you listening right now is that you are getting unique decision-maker level access to global intelligence tools.
Which is so crucial right now. And our mission for today's deep dive is to impartially examine the patterns of the past 14 days. We'll analyze the strategic shift from direct military strikes to this current maritime blockade. We also want to identify the key decision makers and their perspectives and, forecast the most likely future events based purely on the prevailing intelligence.
Right. And maintaining strict neutrality without generating panic.
Absolutely. No fear-mongering. We are relying strictly on the facts from our sources to provide clarity on the different courses of action.
Okay, so to understand how we arrived at a naval blockade, we have to look at the immediate precursor. The foundation of this current standoff rests entirely on the conclusion of the 38-day U.S.-Israeli Operation Epic Fury.
Yes, that spanned from late February to early April.
Right. Can you walk us through the factual core of that?
Sure. So Operation Epic Fury was designed as an overwhelming display of conventional military force. I mean, the U.S. and Israel targeted over 2,000 specific sites.
Wow. 2,000.
Yeah, the primary focus was on degrading Iran's nuclear and defense infrastructure. And the human toll at the very top of Iran's leadership structure was, it was staggering.
Staggering is the word.
The strikes resulted in the death of Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei.
Which is huge.
Massive. Along with the intelligence chief of the IRGC, that's the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, Major General Majid Kademi.
I mean, those are decapitation strikes. You take out the supreme leader and the head of intelligence of their elite military branch. The U.S. spent something like $5 billion just in the opening phases to achieve that. By all conventional metrics of warfare, cutting the head off the snake should mean the snake dies.
Right. But Iran's military didn't collapse.
Yeah, how does a command structure even function when its top leaders are suddenly eliminated and communications are presumably severed?
Well, that's where Iran's specific doctrine comes into play. They didn't structure their military like a snake. They structured it more like a starfish.
The starfish.
Yeah, they shifted to what is known as a decentralized mosaic defense.
Okay, mosaic defense. What does that look like on the ground?
So instead of relying on a rigid top-down command structure, they pre-empowered local IRGC commanders and regional proxy networks to just operate autonomously.
Oh, wow. So if a local commander loses contact with headquarters...
They don't wait for orders. They're already authorized to act like independent guerrilla cells.
Yeah.
They used older, cheaper munitions to overwhelm and basically drain U.S. interceptors.
Right, the interceptors are expensive.
Very. And then they deployed these Chinese-made modular drones that successfully breached the Iron Dome in Israel.
So even with the top leadership gone, the localized units just keep fighting based on preset parameters. That context makes the events around April 8th so fascinating.
Yes, the ceasefire.
Right. Pakistan's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif steps in and facilitates a 14-day ceasefire. But when you look at the statements from the decision makers on both sides, they're describing two entirely different realities.
The perspectives are completely polarized. I mean, on the U.S. side, you have Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth and President Donald Trump claiming the operation was a definitive success.
Right, saying it decisively degraded Iranian military capability.
Exactly. President Trump even framed the ceasefire not as the strategic necessity, but as an act of mercy.
But then you look at the Iranian regime statements, and they are literally throwing parades. They're publicly claiming victory.
Yeah, they're pointing to their Mosaic defense as this triumph of survival against overwhelming odds.
And didn't they reject the U.S. terms?
They outright rejected them. They demanded a complete U.S. military withdrawal from the Middle East and $500 billion in reparations.
$500 billion. But, surviving an airstrike doesn't fund a nation. Realizing they couldn't win a conventional shootout, Iran decided to hit the U.S. where it hurts most, right? The global wallet.
Which brings us to the new board. That's the new theater of operations. When conventional symmetrical warfare became too costly and destructive, Iran shifted to asymmetric economic warfare.
So is this situation akin to a chess match where one player claims checkmate, but the opponent insists the game hasn't ended, it has simply moved to an entirely different board?
That is a perfect analogy. The fragile ceasefire immediately morphed into a massive economic and navigational choke point at the Strait of Hormuz.
Right.
The IRGC stepped in and just asserted full control over the waterway.
And for you listening right now, this isn't just some distant geographic dispute. The Strait of Hormuz is the transit route for roughly 20% of the world's oil and liquefied natural gas.
It's a massive artery.
Exactly. When a waterway like that is choked off, it directly translates to immediate spikes in the cost of your groceries, your daily commute, your energy bills. And the IRGC isn't just verbally claiming control, they are actively enforcing it.
Yeah, our intelligence estimates show the IRGC has deployed advanced dual-launch missile systems along the coastline, specifically the Fateh and Khaibar Shikan systems.
And what makes those systems so concerning?
Well, they're highly mobile, solid-fueled ballistic missiles. Because they use solid fuel, they can be launched with almost no warning time, which makes them incredibly difficult for the U.S. Navy to preemptively track and strike. But, while those represent the high-tech threat, the more immediate disruption actually comes from incredibly low-tech hardware.
The sea mines.
Yes. The IRGC laid mines throughout the strait, but intentionally did so in a really haphazard manner.
I didn't grid or anything.
No, just random. Some of these mines are old, contact-based explosives, and they're simply drifting in the currents.
A drifting mine in one of the most crowded, essential waterways on Earth. That creates a massive psychological area denial.
Exactly. Shipping insurance premiums skyrocket, and commercial captains just flat out refuse to sail.
And this is where the situation takes a turn into the surreal. The IRGC issued an unprecedented mandate.
Right.
They declare that any unauthorized military or commercial vessels are strictly banned from passing. However, permitted civilian ships are allowed to pass the mine safely, provided they pay a toll.
A very specific kind of toll.
Right. And they're demanding these tolls be paid in Chinese yuan or cryptocurrency. Charging cryptocurrency tolls to bypass sea mines sounds like a plot from a futuristic espionage novel, not standard maritime law.
It really does.
I mean, how does this specific financial tactic complicate traditional naval blockades? How does a nation functionally transition to a crypto-based maritime toll system overnight?
Well, the mechanics of it are surprisingly straightforward when it's enforced by military threat. A commercial vessel approaches the strait, the IRGC hails them via radio and provides a digital wallet address or a Chinese banking routing number.
Just over the radio.
Yep. And they refuse safe transit or mine clearing assistance until the transaction is verified on the blockchain or cleared through Beijing.
Wow.
The underlying logic of this financial tactic is entirely about bypassing Western leverage. By forcing shipping companies to pay in yuan or crypto, Iran is circumventing the U.S. dollar and the SWIFT global banking system entirely.
So it basically renders Western economic sanctions completely toothless in this specific microeconomy that they've created.
Exactly. It's a financial bypass masked as a military blockade. And the local impacts have been immediate.
Port operations across the region are heavily disrupted, right?
Heavily. And we're seeing unverified reports of drone attacks on Kuwaiti bases, including a National Guard base. It's escalating anxiety for all the neighboring Gulf states.
Well, the U.S. obviously could not allow the IRGC to functionally tax and control international waters.
No, and that assertion of control directly triggered the United States' latest operational response. On April 11th, 2 U.S. Navy destroyers, the USS Frankie Peterson and the USS Michael Murphy, transited through the strait to conduct active mine-clearing operations.
And they did this without Iranian coordination.
Right, notably without any coordination, because coordinating with them would legitimize their claim of control over the strait.
But meanwhile, the diplomatic channels that were open in Islamabad have completely stalled out.
Right. So on April 13th, the U.S. escalated its response and initiated a comprehensive naval blockade, restricting all maritime traffic entering or exiting Iranian ports.
And once again, we see the decision-maker perspectives wildly diverging here. The U.S. maintains that this blockade is a necessary enforcement of freedom of navigation, a counter to Iran's nuclear ambitions, and vital for securing energy markets.
Yes, but the IRGC's official response is an outright denial that the U.S. destroyers ever successfully passed through the strait in the first place, and they're threatening forceful retaliation against any military incursions.
Wait, I'm genuinely confused by that. The U.S. is broadcasting its naval movements globally? The destroyers are massive, physical ships doing mine-clearing work. Everyone has satellite imagery. How can the IRGC officially deny the ships cross the strait? With the U.S. broadcasting its naval movements globally and the IRGC officially denying those ships ever crossed, are we witnessing two completely separate realities being manufactured for domestic consumption?
We absolutely are.
Yeah.
They aren't trying to convince the global intelligence community. For the Iranian regime admitting that U.S. warships bypassed their newly established control well, it shatters the entire narrative of their victory in Operation Epic Fury.
Right.
They have to project absolute, unbroken dominance over the strait to maintain their internal legitimacy and to keep their proxy networks confident.
So we have a physical gridlock in the Persian Gulf and a manufactured information gridlock in the media, but the ripple effects from these gridlocks are very real, and they're crashing onto shores back home.
Very much so.
Let's look at the domestic turbulence in the U.S., because this is where the conflict really starts exploiting internal vulnerabilities.
The intelligence reports highlight severe domestic political polarization here in the United States surrounding this conflict. President Trump has taken to Truth Social with highly controversial posts explicitly threatening to open the strait by force and warning of severe consequences for Iran.
And that rhetoric has triggered intense, immediate concern across the political spectrum.
Yes. Democratic leaders, including Chuck Schumer, have strongly condemned the statements as reckless. They're warning that such rhetoric risks destabilizing crucial international alliances.
And as always, we are just presenting the facts of what both sides are saying here without endorsing either viewpoint. But that polarization isn't just contained to arguments in Congress. There is a massive nationwide general strike planned for May 1st.
Right, organized by the Party for Socialism and Liberation.
Which our sources note has pro-China alignments. Their stated goal is to completely disrupt the U.S. economy to pressure the administration into ending the war.
And in response, there are organized efforts from within the administration to legally criminalize these left-wing opposition groups.
So wait, a naval blockade in the Middle East is directly triggering a massive labor strike in the U.S., which is then triggering efforts to criminalize political opposition. It appears the blockade isn't just containing Iran, it's catalyzing domestic strikes in the U.S. Are we seeing a new era where foreign adversaries rely on their opponents' domestic political polarization as their primary defense mechanism?
That is the true nature of modern asymmetric warfare. It isn't just about drones and sea mines anymore. It's about finding and exploiting societal stress points.
Interesting.
If an adversary knows that a protracted foreign conflict will organically trigger crippling economic strikes and legislative warfare within your own borders, they don't necessarily need to defeat your military on the battlefield.
They just need to stretch the conflict out long enough to fracture your internal cohesion.
Exactly. Outlast the political will. And that fracturing extends to international alliances as well. In Europe, the blockade is threatening a critical aviation fuel shortage.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Organizations are officially warning of systemic fuel deficits that could cause widespread, cascading flight cancellations across the continent within weeks.
And the strain on those alliances is palpable in the intelligence briefings. You have a UK security advisor publicly stating that the U.S. is no longer a reliable partner in global security.
Lord Peter Ricketts.
Right. Meanwhile, China and Japan are stepping into the void, actively urging de-escalation and offering themselves as mediators.
The geopolitical map is just being redrawn in real time.
So acknowledging this gridlock, both at sea and in the political arena, let's look at the most probable courses of action. Based on current intelligence estimates, there are specific near-term forecasts we can make to prepare you for the days ahead.
First, regarding the Iranian regime. They are under immense economic and social stress, obviously, but the assessment is that they remain firmly in control of the state apparatus.
How are they maintaining that control amidst the pressure?
Primarily through heavy domestic censorship, targeted internet blackouts to prevent organizing, and the mobilization of their internal security forces.
Right. And as for military action?
Direct, conventional state-on-state warfare, like massive troop deployments or direct missile barrages against U.S. bases, that's considered highly unlikely in the near term. The forecast heavily favors proxy attacks, deniable maritime harassment, and sophisticated cyber activity.
So they want to constantly signal their resolve and impose economic costs, but without triggering a level of escalation that would threaten the regime's survival.
Exactly. And on the U.S. side, expect the Navy to continue its methodical, heavily armed mine-clearing operations in the Strait.
Keeping the maritime environment highly tense.
Very tense. And globally, keep an eye on energy-importing nations and the EU. Because of the prolonged squeeze on the Strait and the fuel deficits, they are highly likely to announce urgent regulatory actions and emergency rationing measures very soon.
So for our listeners trying to cut through the heavy political rhetoric from both sides, if we strip away the intense political rhetoric from both sides, what is the single most objective indicator our listeners should watch for in the next 48 hours to signal whether this blockade holds steady or breaks into active combat?
Look past the official statements and focus entirely on the satellite data. Specifically, watch for the movement of IRGC fast attack craft at the Bandar Abbas Naval Complex.
Okay, the fast attack craft.
If those small, highly agile boats leave the port in large numbers and begin to swarm the central transit corridors of the Strait, that is the physical, undeniable indicator. That movement would signal that Iran is transitioning from a posture of area denial to active engagement against the U.S. destroyers.
That is definitely the indicator to watch.
And, if I can offer a final thought on the patterns we've analyzed today,
Please.
it's just to highlight a profound paradox of modern warfare. The U.S. and Israel launched Operation Epic Fury, which was a massive, multi-billion-dollar offensive utilizing some of the most advanced aerospace technology ever created.
Right.
Yet that entire apparatus and the global supply chain it protects has been effectively bottlenecked by incredibly low-tech asymmetric tactics.
Like old drifting sea mines.
Exactly, floating in a narrow strait. It is fundamentally rewriting how superpowers project global influence, proving that total technological supremacy does not guarantee control over the battlefield or the economy.
It is the ultimate reality check on modern military power. And it's a great point to leave our listeners mulling over today. The contrast between the clean, authoritative news anchors of the 1960s and the incredibly murky, disputed, asymmetric reality we actually live in today couldn't be sharper.
No, it really couldn't.
Which is exactly why tools that cut through that noise are so vital. As we mentioned at the top of the broadcast, Stylo News is a powerful mobile and computer app that you can download right now.
It's a fantastic resource.
It really is. It allows you as an individual to customize your own personal intelligence-style briefs. It pulls from hundreds of traditional news sources, as well as real-time updates from X, formerly Twitter, filtering out the manufactured narratives to give you the actual signal.
Right, providing you with the exact same analytical framework that global decision makers use to understand these complex shifts.
We encourage you to take control of your information feed. Subscribe to Stylo News today to get your own AI-powered news on demand. You can find them at www.stylonews.com.
Absolutely check it out.
Thank you so much for joining us and listening to today's deep dive. We always enjoy untangling these complex global issues for you. Please feel free to request topics for future deep dives that you want us to explore. And don't forget to follow Stylo News on your favorite social media platforms. Stay informed, stay curious, and we will see you next time.